This is Rashaan Charles. He was 20 years old, the eldest of 7 children. He loved football. He was a beloved son, brother, cousin, nephew, grandson and friend. And he was a father. Rashaan's daughter was coming up to her 2nd birthday when he died.
As a 20-year-old man, he was fit, he was active. I have made no bones about it. And my family are not going to quibble with this either. He didn't lead an exemplary lifestyle. Yes, he did have a criminal record. Yes, he has convictions for possession and dealing in drugs.
This is Rod Charles, Rashaan's great uncle. In 2014, he retired at the rank of Chief Inspector after 30 years with the Metropolitan Police. We spoke at his home in August 2018, just over a year after Rashaan died.
I can tell you that as a young man, had a great relationship with his mother, equally a great relationship with his grandmother, my sister, and with my father, an 83-year-old man who, Rashaan's great-grandfather, really probably even the best relationship. And my father spent a significant amount of time trying to steer Rashaan away from some of the activity he was involved in. But he was an integral part of the family. Yeah, the 22nd of July 2017, I was at my home address with my family and took a number of calls from different family members to tell me that Rashaan had been detained by a police officer and died during the process. Obviously, it's really sad news. And that day, throughout the day, I obviously thought about the loss of a relative, but my assumption was, well, the incident must have merited whatever actions the police officer took.
The day after Rashaan's death, the Metropolitan Police claimed that he had been taken ill after trying to swallow an object. They said an officer had intervened to prevent Rashaan from harming himself.
It wasn't until 20 or 24 hours later, the following morning, which was a Sunday morning, when a niece called me to say, Uncle Rodney, have a look at some footage what's on CCTV, which has been uploaded to YouTube. And it was when I looked at the footage on YouTube that changed everything. It's clear to me that Rashaan is in the process of being restrained, but the nature of the force being used to this day and I've been spoken out, and I continue to speak out about it, it has caused me and continues to cause me a lot of concern.
And can you explain to us and talk us through exactly what you saw on that CCTV footage?
Well, I see a police officer coming into a store and Rashaan moving into the store quite fast.
Rashaan had tucked a package inside his mouth. It contained caffeine and paracetamol. The police claimed he tried to swallow the package.
Well, the right thing for the officer to do is to pursue and to locate and ideally detain the person he suspects. He has a decision to make. Do I go forward and detain? Do I communicate from distance to the individual? You could easily say, stand still, show me your hands, turn around. But the officer says nothing. The officer simply goes forward and it physically engages Rashaan. And what we see there is a neck hold and a compact throw to the ground. Rashaan is thrown over to the left on the side, and the officer ends up falling to ground on top of Rashaan. It isn't a rear takedown. There is no controlled descent. Nobody has ever tendered any evidence, nor can they tender evidence that Rashaan used any force whatsoever. The officer was not at fear of harm from Rashaan because he threatened nothing to the officer, and likewise no member of the public nearby was threatened by Rashaan. The officer is on top of Rashaan. There is a clear continuation of a neck hold. There is pressure applied to his face and his jaw area. There is a significant degree of force when Rashaan is held to ground. He is in a neck hold on the ground. There's a particular period where the officer anchors his a foot to adjacent shop furniture and gets a good purchase to secure his grip to stabilise himself. I say again, there will be circumstances when that type of force needs to be used, but these are not those circumstances.
A second man joins the uniformed officer. Police said he was a member of the public.
He offers assistance to the officer. What causes me concern is that he positions himself on top of Rashaan and remains astride Rashaan for over 3 minutes, probably closer to 4 minutes. He seems to have taken control of the scene.
A few months after Rashaan died, police lawyers persuaded a coroner to grant an anonymity order. So we're not allowed to tell you who these men are. We have to call the uniformed police officer BX47 or Bravo X-Ray 47. We can tell you that he and his colleagues were members of the highly trained territorial support group. We can't name the member of the public. We have to call him Witness 1.
Bravo X-Ray 47 seemed not to have control. He seemed not to be able to make the appropriate decisions. And to me, it's quite bizarre. I haven't seen that in my service. I have been assisted, and I've seen officers assisted by members of the public before, but I've never seen a shift in control of scenes where people question who is in charge here. And the footage has caused many people to think, well, is the officer in control of this or is the member of the public? Some have even said, is that a member of the public? Because the level of involvement is such, some people think he's an undercover police officer. I don't, but I do think that Bravo X-Ray 47 panicked and lost control.
Early on, many people who saw the video assumed that the second man was a police officer. The Independent Police Complaints Commission issued a statement. They said, "A member of the public visible on CCTV and involved in Rashaan's restraint is not connected to the police." We asked Rod Charles, how can you tell that Rashaan is in distress?
Witness 1 puts pressure on Rashaan's back, and as Rashaan is pushed back toward the ground, his eyes are staring up. His head turns to the left and he's staring up, and to me, Rashaan is panicking. Rashaan is in clear distress. Then they apply handcuffs, but as soon as the handcuffs go on, you can see that Rashaan's right hand is limp, and handcuffs are applied to a person who is not resisting. And even if you didn't know, even if they didn't know that he was limp and motionless at that time, the handcuffs stay on for 3 minutes and 44/45 seconds. It's a long time to remain on a person who is in distress.
The Independent Office for Police Conduct, or IOPC, investigates serious incidents involving the police. Until January 2018, it was called the Independent Police Complaints Commission, or IPCC.
It is a flawed investigation. I've been in meetings with the IOPC, or their predecessor, which was the IPCC, and the first question I asked was what were the grounds for Rashaan's stop and search, and I thought nothing of it, because I simply thought that the investigator would tell me and then I would have a starting point. It's when they couldn't tell me why Bravo X-Ray 47 was stopping Rashaan and using that level of force. They couldn't tell me why.
Later on, the police claimed the car Rashaan had been travelling in attracted their interest because it was behaving strangely and changed its indicator lights several times. They said the driver's eyes lit up on seeing the police vehicle. Rashaan got out and BX47 followed him.
Rashan died on the 22nd of July. Bravo X-Ray 47 was not subject to a formal interview until December. That's bizarre. I found it strange that they would not do an initial interview within a few days of the officer who was instrumental in the restraint where Rashan died. And then you can test the information that person gives you against a range of witnesses, the range of analysis and search of scenes that you're going to conduct. And then you can do a roundup interview later, some months later. To interview Bravo X-Ray 47 so many months after the incident leaves it tainted, simply because there's issues about how clear it is in your mind. I know he's never going to forget this, but a number of other people would have interacted with that officer. He will, no matter what he says, he will have viewed that CCTV on open source YouTube several times, and that will impact upon what you're going to say in interview. Whereas what we want in interview is, what is your recollection, your own recollection of what you did at the scene, not what you see yourself doing, having viewed it for several months before we interview you. We can never turn the clock back now, but it's a flawed investigation. I want a fair, transparent and genuine investigation, open investigation. And because I truly believe, based on what I've seen and what I've gleaned so far, that Rashan died needlessly, be it criminal or be it misconduct proceedings, there needs to be some sanctions. The flip side of that is, I don't believe for a moment, and neither does my family, that the officer set out to cause a fatality that day when he began his tour of duty. So while there does need to be some sanctions, be it criminal or be it misconduct proceedings, internal disciplinary, which might and probably should result in the officer no longer serving within the police service because of these disastrous end outcomes, the officer does need to be supported as well. This is not a vilification of that individual. This is about a proper scrutiny, a proper investigation and justice, and we've seen anything but so far.
Rashan's family was told that one of the police officers at the scene accidentally deleted some of the evidence recorded on his body-worn camera.
The interactions between the investigators and the family have been quite poor. They will claim that they've given regular updates to the family, but you get a 6-line letter every 4 weeks, and it doesn't tell us a great deal. I mean, one of the letters in October the 25th, I think I'm accurate there, but what I'm certain I'm accurate about is that the letter said that one of the officers' body-worn video footage has been accidentally deleted. But they say that individual wasn't significant, didn't have significant evidence. Well, if it's lost, how would you know if it's significant or not? And let me be absolutely clear, you don't need to be physically at the scene for any footage, visual or audible, to be relevant to this case. Because it could be that the officer, he'll remain nameless for now, but I know his details, but his footage was deleted accidentally, and I can equally make the case, or maybe it wasn't accidental. Maybe he picked up some audio whilst removed from the scene, but could be detrimental to the case. But what is significant is the Met Police or IOPC have actually taken no action whatsoever. And if they have taken action, they certainly haven't told us about it. But this is a fatality where there's evidence missing, and they don't seem to be taking it seriously.
Inquests are legal inquiries into the causes and circumstances of a death. The inquest into Rashan's death was held before a jury at St Pancras Coroner's Court in London in June 2018.
This case hinges on what happened in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes in a convenience store on the 22nd of July 2017, and it hinges on the appropriateness or the inappropriateness of the use of force by the police officer when he engaged Rashan. Yet we spent many hours in the inquest talking about Rashan's lifestyle, and a caricature was created of him as a major organised criminal. This is a young man who doesn't have a great deal of money. He's not doesn't have a significant source of income, doesn't own his own massive house anyway. He lives in council premises. But he, as far as they were concerned, they achieved what they wanted to do by caricaturing him as an organised criminal. Then, the borough that I grew up in and I know very well, I mean, Hackney's gentrification and the cost of their property and the rate of new business in Hackney, it's all there for all to see. But they spent an equal amount of time presenting Hackney as a no-go area. Guns and knives and police are at risk if they deploy in that area. Hackney has challenges, so do many parts of London. But the barristers know why they chose to distract attention, to create a Rashan which isn't the true Rashan, to create a Hackney which is not a true Hackney, when what they needed to do was focus on the use of force when the officer encountered Rashan. It is as simple as that.
At the inquest, 2 former Metropolitan Police officers, Ian Reid and Martin Graves, testified as expert witnesses on police use of force. Ian Reid told the inquest, "From what I have seen and what I have heard, BX47 has tried to look after Rashan."
The officer claims he used a rear takedown, and we know he didn't. Just because you bring 2 use of force experts in to say, and let's be clear, they say, well, whilst it's not textbook, it's nearly there. Well, my view is, if it's not textbook and if it's not there, then it's not there. That is not a rear takedown. Why the IOPC would choose to bring in 2 experts who served with the very force under scrutiny for this fatality is beyond me. And when they have 75 years collective police service between them, it's not independent. How could it be? They had 40 plus other forces to choose from. You've got to ask yourself why they haven't gone there.
Independent medical experts also testified at the inquest. Dr. Jasmeet Soor said that the way BX47 tackled Rashan to the ground clearly contributed to the package getting lodged in his windpipe.
I didn't miss a day in court for 2.5 weeks. There's not a moment when the coroner, Mary Hassel, said to either of the police representatives, "You will move on, please move on." Yet my notebook is, almost daily. There were questions being put by our barrister who did a very good job. But when you're told to move on, when you are told, Mr. Punton, you will move on, that's just not a fair process. Tell our barrister to move on, you silence the family. You need to have parity. And there wasn't parity between the different councils that were representing the different parties. The coroner removed all pejorative options available to the jury. And whilst that was disappointing, that's my understatement, when we knew all that was left would be a narrative verdict, we thought, well, okay, the jury will be able to expand upon why they say it's an accident. But the coroner, not as good as she did, advise the jury that, if you find this an accident, and when you tell someone 6 times if you find this an accident, I think you're telling them that this is an accident.
The coroner told the jury to consider whether Rashan's death was an accident and not to consider a more critical conclusion such as unlawful killing or neglect. the jury returned a conclusion of accidental death. What happened to BX47? And the member of the public, witness 1? There were no criminal charges. On the 15th of August 2018, the Independent Office for Police Conduct cleared BX47 of misconduct. They said he failed to follow first aid protocols and he delayed calling an ambulance. They said he did his best in difficult circumstances, and his shortfalls in performance should be addressed in a meeting with his senior management. Rashaan Charles was one of 6 black men who died during or after police restraint in England over 9 months from June 2017. As well as Rashaan, there was Edson DaCosta, aged 25, Darren Cumberbatch, 32, Shane Bryant, 29, Nuno Cardoso, 25, and Kevin Clark, who was 35. Since our interview with Rod Charles, we've examined more footage from the convenience store. We'll leave you with interactions between 2 police officers and the member of the public, witness 1. These encounters happened while close by, paramedics worked on Rashaan. Here's witness 1 beckoning to BX47. BX47 immediately approaches, stepping over Rashaan's feet to join him in the aisle. Witness 1 shows BX47 a card from his wallet. The officer writes in his notebook. The 2 men clasp hands. At the inquest into Rashaan's death, both BX47 and Witness 1 said under oath that they had never met before the fatal incident. The family's barrister asked Witness 1 if he felt that BX47 had assisted him. Witness 1 replied, "I feel 47 was not 100%. He was tired. He was not himself." Here's another officer at the scene. He's holding 2 evidence bags. One bag appears to contain some small personal items of Rashaan's, and the other contains the package that paramedics removed from his airway. This officer approaches Witness 1, shows him the evidence bags, and they talk. What are we to make of these encounters? Our work continues.